Canada's Federal Minister of Labour has called the Conservatives' opposition to amending the existing Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement spooky. But nothing is more spooky than him thinking that Ukraine is some sort of beacon of democracy that requires unfettered protection at the cost of our own economic prosperity.
The rise of a right-wing, American MAGA-influenced thinking that has made Canadian Conservatives, who used to be among the strongest defenders of Ukraine, and I'll admit it, turn their backs on something Ukraine needs in its hour of need. That is the danger of the rise of the right-wing influence that is feeling its impact in Canada. That's what not just Ukrainian Canadians, but all Canadians should be concerned about when the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre turn their backs on history, turn their backs on our friends and allies, turns their backs on the international rules-based order and our support for the UN Charter and territorial integrity. It is of real concern and should be of concern to all of us because we're seeing that spiking up all around the world.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News, and recently Seamus O'Regan, the Federal Minister of Labour, responded to reporters at the House of Commons following the Conservatives' vote against a free trade deal with Ukraine that would see more tax-paying Canadian dollars squandered off to the country. It's legislation meant to modernize the existing Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, introduced by Trade Minister Mary Ng, who was under fire last year and earlier this year for awarding government media training contracts to her friends, a clear breach of conflict of interest rules. She's also the same minister that, when questioned about this very agreement, wasn't really sure if carbon emissions were classified as pollution. Have a look at this.
Minister, do you consider CO2 pollution?
Yes.
Yes?
Sorry, what is the question? Is air pollution?
No, the question is, do you consider CO2 emissions to be pollution? Do you not know?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't know. That's interesting. So you put in in this trade agreement, Article 13.3, Sub 3, that those who pollute the environment should bear the cost of that pollution. But you don't know what constitutes pollution? Are CO2 emissions pollution in your mind under this trade agreement?
What I think is really
carbon emissions that you guys talk about all the time, is that pollution?
What's in this agreement are some of the highest environmental standards, which the Ukrainians and Canada agree to, because we both agree that fighting climate change is good, and that as they're going to rebuild their economy and as they're going to rebuild their industries, as they're going to rebuild from this illegal war, that what they are able to do is actually fight climate change.
As fiscally responsible Conservatives increasingly represent the genuine concerns of Canadians grappling with unprecedented inflation, soaring interest rates, and record taxation, their opposition to ineffective policies and agreements like this reflects a commitment to prioritizing measures that truly benefit Canadians. As pointed out by the Bank of Nova Scotia, nearly half of the base point interest rates seen across Canada were a result of government overspending. Their November update reads, quote, "Fiscal policy at all levels of government has been badly miscalibrated from an inflation management perspective," end quote. And here's what Minister O'Regan had to say about this Conservative opposition.
And can we get your reaction to the Conservatives voting against that free trade deal with Ukraine? Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says this is about the carbon tax, imposing that on Ukraine. What is your reaction?
It's appalling. It's utterly appalling. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. This is a democracy that is fighting the battle for democracy right now against an autocratic regime. This is a deal they negotiated for their economic development, and they're playing. I don't know what they're doing. I think there's more up here than petty politics or than trying to hang this on a carbon tax argument. This is really spooky. I don't know what they're doing, but it scares me, to be honest with you, and I'll fight them tooth and nail on it.
Putting Canadians first is spooky to the Liberals who think that Ukraine is a democracy. But let me remind you that democracies don't ban opposition parties like President Zelensky has. In May of 2022, the Ukrainian parliament passed a law formally banning opposition parties. He also signed a law that expands government regulatory power over news media. It's something that the Justin Trudeau Liberals are also keen on trying to ram through, like the ambiguously worded legislation called the Online Harms Act, despite the fact that free press is a cornerstone of a healthy, functioning democracy. Democracies also don't ban churches or religious beliefs, as Zelensky has. Democracies don't ban elections, but under Zelensky's regime, they're banned. He declared martial law in 2022 in what was supposed to be a temporary response to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, a move that has been repeatedly extended. Zelensky has said that the elections scheduled for March 2024 are canceled because, according to His Majesty, now is not the time for citizens to hit the polls. And Minister O'Regan continues to double down on this rhetoric, calling Ukraine a beacon of democracy, if you can believe it.
We are the government that decided that the retirement age should go back to 65, not 67, which was a decision that side of the House decided to make while their leader was in Davos, Switzerland. But let's stay in Europe for 1 second, Mr. Speaker, and talk about the appalling decision by these so-called conservatives to turn down a free trade agreement with a beacon of democracy like Ukraine. What is up with that party? That's what Canadians want to know. And this carbon tax excuse, no one's buying. What's up, Mr. Speaker?
Why do we need amendments to an existing free trade agreement anyway? I guess Trudeau's initial plan to somehow freeze Putin's banking assets, a tactic that he deployed on his own citizens when they peacefully protested tyrannical government overreach in January and February of 2022, and somehow also force Russia to finance the rebuilding of Ukraine, didn't quite come to fruition.
We will continue to be there with as much as it takes for as long as it takes. But that's also, this financial context is why we are looking very carefully at how we can ensure that Russia itself is paying for the devastation they're causing in Ukraine. We've announced today a working group we'll look to create to see if things like Russian central bank assets, which total $200 or $300 billion in Europe and in the United States primarily, could be set to actually support Ukraine in this fight and indeed help over the long term to restore the prosperity and peace for the people of Ukraine.
Nope. Instead, Canadians and our government seek to have taxpayers fund the bill and the reconstruction. According to a September update, Canada has already committed more than $9.5 billion, that's a B, billion dollars in multifaceted assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of 2022. When do we say enough is enough? A Ledger poll from October found that less than half of Canadians believe we should maintain the current levels of financial aid to Ukraine. Canadians are increasingly fearful that they will freeze and starve in the dark this winter. We're lining up in record numbers to food banks, and I think it's safe to say that many Canadians would like to hop off of the proxy war funding bandwagon. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. You can add your name to the growing list of Canadians who oppose the Liberals' nonsensical carbon tax cash grab that is hurting Canadians and doing basically nothing to help the environment at stopthecarbontax.com. If you support us, a free and independent press that is able to speak truth to power, point out the hypocrisy of the bureaucracy, and be general skeptics, then please consider chipping in a few dollars while you're there. That's stopthecarbontax.com.